guy that tweeted in reference to Draymond Green. Did you see that?
Weatherman?
Yeah.
I was in a very unique space when all of this occurred. And I do feel and see God giving me new opportunities to talk about it because I'm not scared to talk about it anymore. I've still got to deal with the aches and bruises of what I went through. And I would love to salve some of the aches and bruises of people who misunderstood. You know, maybe there's somebody out there who just wanted to hear, I'm sorry. I would love to give them that. But I'm also now uniquely positioned, I think, to talk about some of these things all through a Christian lens. And so that kind of wraps up everything I've been through. I want to humble myself and ask for forgiveness. I want to try to right wrongs that I can. And I want to move forward. And if anything good comes of that, point all the glory to God. Nothing to me. Has nothing to do with me. I say this in the little book I wrote, that my prayer was always to be in God's will. And now I've changed that to, I want to be in your will, God, but please equip me first so that I'm ready when these kind of things happen. Because, man, when you're forced into a situation like this, you have to give it all to God 1,000%. First of all, thank you all for being here, in person, online. Let me just say it has been refreshing and encouraging to hear Reverend Johnson speak, Dr. Sandra. It's just very informative to get to this point. My name is Joey Sulipeck. I was in local television for about 25 years, and I'm a Christian. I have spoken over those 25 years hundreds of times to thousands of people and kids, but never like what I'm about to talk about right now. This is a first for me out of all of that, and I've got a story that I want to share. Now, I'm going to talk tonight about some sensitive things. I may cover some topics that you normally try to avoid, but above all, my goal this evening is to simply glorify God. Now, if that opening statement wasn't enough to make you a little nervous, then let me tell you this. I worked on my presentation for more than 2 months and threw the whole thing out last night. Started over, rewrote it, and stripped it down. And here's the reason why. Part of the challenge of speaking tonight is that there's a lot of vulnerability, and there's a lot that needs to be said. More than I could do in 30 minutes or 45 minutes. So I decided to shorten my presentation and my thoughts that you're about to hear. And then we're going to spend some time after with an open dialogue to sort of let it breathe and flesh some things out. So let me start with this. I was asked to speak tonight about what I went through about 16 months ago during a basketball playoff game. I posted a tweet during that game, and I used the term knuckle dragging to describe one of the players. That term was one of 27 words in my tweet, but that one word ignited a national inferno. Now, originally, part of the speech I was going to give was going to explain how my words were taken and turned into something else, but I've decided not to do that. I'm going to focus on what happened after. If anybody would like to talk about that, I'm happy to at any time to have that discussion, but not right now. Right now, I want to say this. And I'm going to set the stage for what we're going to talk about because I've thought long and hard about this from every angle. There are people here tonight that know me extremely well. There are some that maybe just kind of know my name or have heard about me, and some who don't know me at all. So I want to begin by asking you a question, and I'm going to do that a couple of times. Right now, before we even start, before I say anything else, just in your own mind, in your head, what opinion of me did you bring in here tonight? What silent little voice in there gave you an idea of who I am, just from what you've heard, or maybe what you've experienced? In other words, who do you think I am inside? Preconceived. And this is a critical point I'm going to bring back around later. I ask that because each of you has an opinion. But where did that come from? Where is its roots? how did you get to that idea or thought about me? And we're going to broaden this in a minute. Where did it come from? Now, maybe you don't care about me. Maybe it's all just white noise. Or you think I should take an opportunity tonight to apologize to the world. Or maybe you think I did nothing wrong and I have the right to be angry at how I was treated. I think that all three of those are very real. And either here or online, I think all three of those groups are probably represented. And I will probably find a way to offend each and every one of you. So how do I approach that with a speech? How do you wrap that up in something concise? That's kind of what was going through my mind as I was trying to put down words, and that's a difficult thing. And here's the answer. I don't know. I know that every time I've touched a keyboard, I've prayed. Every time my fingers tried to make words, I asked God to send the Holy Spirit to guide me and to give me the thoughts and give me the words that maybe they'll help, maybe they'll heal. That's my goal for tonight. So here we are to discuss things that we don't normally discuss in mixed company especially. So let's dive into that and let me talk about some of the things I've learned. Almost a year and a half ago, I posted that tweet, 16 months. I had absolutely no idea that word that I used had any racial meaning, zero, none at all. I learned about its meaning from tweets that were then sent back to me with some horrible images, and then from the millions of news articles that were written afterward. In fact, as I was watching some of Chris's video, I remembered that a lot of these articles had to explain why it was offensive. And one of the things they said was this was a word historically used by bigots. The day after this broke, the night it happened, I knew immediately this was a grass fire. And I emailed all my management, told them exactly what happened, shut down my accounts and said, this is what's going on, and this looks like it's going to grow, but I don't know how big. And they thought at first, this will blow over in no time. I had a lot of good friends who thought that same thing. But the very next day, the corporate side forbid me to speak at all. In fact, I was told to disappear and be completely silent. That was my orders while they decided what to do. By the way, without speaking to me, they decide what to do. They told me that if I spoke out, I'd be immediately terminated. Meanwhile, this inferno is raging and growing and building more and more oxygen, more and more tinder. So let me give you another question. In today's culture, if you see a situation like this, and these happen occasionally, if someone is silent, if someone shuts down their Twitter account or does that, in your mind, does that indicate guilt? That's a good question. I think sometimes it does. I think that sometimes that naturally happens to me. It kind of depends on what you're reading, which is another big issue here. So this battle began to rage around me without my involvement. National podcasts, talk radio, Twitter, Facebook, TV, one side very angry and wanting me fired and buried. And on the far opposite end, I had talk show hosts and public figures warning me not to apologize, that they were angry for me. And so here I was caught in the middle of that. So what did I learn? I learned this is so complicated. There's no correct one answer. So let me tell you how I feel. I want everyone on the planet to know, and I wish the gentleman who was originally offended to know, I'm sorry, this whole thing ever happened, naturally. I wish that I could go back and do a do-over. What I'm really sorry about is I didn't know a word was offensive. Now that leads to a lot of other questions when you don't know a word that was historically a racial slur was offensive, but I do regret that. I regret all that negative attention, and here's why. As a Christian, I want to be sensitive to others as much as I can. As a Christian, I want peace and reconciliation. I don't want to be a stumbling block in any way. So I found myself in this crazy arena where I wanted to speak, I couldn't speak, and the conversation was just swirling around me. It was a very surreal place to be. So my company at the time just wanted the whole thing to go away as quickly as possible. Again, a lot of decisions were made without us even having a conversation. I learned that finding out what was right or wrong doesn't really matter in some instances like this. It was more of how do we distance ourselves from it and just get the spotlight off of us. And I think that's a pretty common occurrence here nationally. Online, the attacks on me and my family were an avalanche. I mean, brutal. My children, my wife, myself, relentless. I began to get some support from people who knew me and loved me, but not nearly as much as I'd hoped. And if you were in the same situation, I think you would find yourself there as well. And I learned, and this may not surprise you, a lot of people were scared to support me. I found that over and over. They were afraid to get caught up in the vortex and to stand up and go, let's take a step back and look at this another way. Why don't we hear him speak? Why don't we hear what he has to say? When you're in a situation like that, what happens, I think, is that everybody sees themselves as a potential lightning rod for that lightning bolt to jump over and hurt them. Here's something else I learned. No one really wants to talk about race, especially when we're in mixed race company. It becomes very awkward and uncomfortable. When race is the topic, it's almost as if every word is covered in broken glass and everybody's afraid of being cut. And while the answer to why that is going to be personal to each and every individual, I think that part of the reason is this, and this is where we're really going to get down to the crux of the matter, to the foundation. Every one of us has had a different life experience. Wouldn't you agree? That's pretty critical. Experiences that have shaped us, shaped who we are, how we think, how we act, how we react, how our parents thought, how our grandparents thought. Everyone is different. And sometimes experiences like that, especially if you're not exposed to other cultures or you're just sort of myopic, can cause us to see life through a filter or goggles. And goggles can sometimes distort what we see. I think sometimes we're wearing those goggles when we don't even know it. I learned that there's really no way to prove to someone else your intent or your heart. You know, I had to go through a lot of DEI training when I was with my company, as well as a lot of one-on-one during the interim when all this was going down. And I kept reading in all these things that they would give us, intent doesn't matter. Intent doesn't matter. If you offend, you offend. As a Christian, I believe intent does matter. If my child is accidentally hit, I'm not angry at the person that did it. It's an accident. If my child is hit intentionally, well, now we've got a problem. So the problem I had was, how do you prove to the world you're not something you've been accused of? It was a really very crazy situation. And all you can really do is live by example, right? Ask the Holy Spirit to work in your life and help your branches bear fruit. That is how we will know one another. But what was interesting about my situation is that so many of the attacks were coming from out of Memphis. The West Coast, the East Coast, fake accounts, all getting coordinated. And these were individuals who had no exposure to me in my public life over the past 25 years. A lot of these people were making their decisions about me in a vacuum. And I don't think we can do that in a case like this. I think we've got to be a little bit more proactive in digging down. This next lesson was one of the first and hardest lessons I learned, and I think this is difficult for men around the globe, and it's that I could not fix it. And that really almost broke me because I wanted to. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to call every single person and say, look, this is a mistake, you're wrong, let me tell you why you're right. And a good friend finally convinced me, that's not going to happen. That's impossible for you to do. Men are wired, if there's a problem, let's find the solution, aren't we? Don't our wives just want us to listen and we want to fix it? I wanted to fix this. And it almost took me down because it just was too big. It was too big for me, but you know what? It was not too big for God. It was not too big for God. And so what truly saved me was learning to give the entirety over to God. Now, I don't want that to sound like a cliche. I don't want to underemphasize the wonderful things that my wife did, my sister did, my family did, my friends did to support me. They did. But I was able to finally give it to God. And listen, friends, I'm going to stray from my notes. My wife will tell you, I sat in the backyard in a chair and looked at the clouds for days, stunned. Just when you're scrolling through a news feed and every national article is calling you something that's inaccurate, it'll crush you, especially when you care about your community, when you don't want to hurt those relationships. You know, God amazingly took that burden off of me, and he showed me this. And I want to preach this, and I want you to preach it to your friends, to your children, to your grandchildren. The world does not have the right to define you. It's going to try. It's going to try to put you in a box, but it doesn't have that right. Social media makes us think that. Instagram makes us think that. It doesn't. What we have to lean on is what I leaned on, and that is this. My identity is in Christ. All else is noise. He poured peace into me, and he continues to bless me. Now, a lot of people think they ruined my life. I mean, I was sent so many memes made of me, how much I've fallen, and that one had my head on a bellboy at the Peabody to try to think, that actually is not an insult. I think that'd probably be a great job, but my life wasn't ruined. That's not the case at all. In fact, I'm here to tell you, I think I'm happier now than I have been in many, many years. In fact, my daughter came up to me one Wednesday night at church a few weeks after this began, and I could not go to Wednesday night church for 25 years. I was always on the air at night. And she said, "Do you mind if I tell you something without hurting your feelings?" And I said, "No, go right ahead, honey." And she said, "You look so much happier now. After all this, you look happier and relaxed." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You're laughing and you're visiting with people at the service and you're not rushing out to get to the TV station." I say that to say this to you. We're all going to endure hits and falls, but God can take those things and make great things out of it. He promises that. Do I miss television? Not really. Television is a tough world. I got a lot of people here who could attest to that. And one of the blessings from leaving TV is that if I was still under contract, under a TV contract, which are ironclad, I wouldn't be free to speak like this. I couldn't speak here tonight about anything of faith or race or anything that they could deem offensive. They own the right to say what they think is offensive or not, and to, discipline you accordingly. So how can I use my experience to glorify God? If this happened to you, how would you use it? That's an interesting question, and hopefully it's by opportunities just like this. This has been difficult. One of the hardest things I've ever done was preparing for this speech. You wonder, is there going to be picketers outside? Or did you guys all bring tomatoes to throw at me? These thoughts go through your head because Satan will attack. But this is where I feel like I'm led, to have these kind of talks, to talk about things that we don't often talk about. I wrote a very short book about this. It's on Amazon if you have any interest. It's about how God brought me through it. I mean, it's a quick read, but I just wrote down as I was clawing my way back, which was really God lifting me up, at things and people that he used to bring me out of that. And I mean, that's continued to bless me as well. And to God be the glory for that. Here's something else I've learned. That as Christians, we all worship a God of what I've called unsignaled left turns. Have you ever had a point where your life just seems like it's stuck on one road and it's never going to change and I'm going to be here forever, and all of a sudden you're going in this direction, right? We all think we're driving, but we're not. God isn't our co-pilot, he's the pilot. He knows where we're going. We're simply buckled in, and he's going to get us there safely, okay? Let your soul rest in that. I learned this, and this is critical. I learned that your job is not who you are. I had so many friends in television news, and there's a lot of turnover in TV news, that once they lost that position, they lost who they were and would just spiral. Your job is not who you are. Your job is how you serve. We're each supposed to bloom where we're planted, and I strongly believe that. We are designed to work. That was one of God's first commandments, was that we work, and we're commanded to serve. So glamour isn't the prize. Obedience to Christ, that's the goal. Now, because of this experience, some of the blessings I want to share with you, because this is a positive conference and I want this to be a positive dialogue. I have had countless amazing discussions with real people every day. The community that I love has been amazing to me and my family. Warm, loving, real, face-to-face conversations, usually at Kroger or Lowe's. That's my spot. And there's a beauty to those shared experiences. You know, for the believers, we'll be talking about that in glory one day. And I'll be discussing how much that meant to me when I was at a very low point in my life. And I continue to daily learn more and more about grace. You know, you get to a point where you think, okay, I'm old, I know everything. Man, that is not the case. God will jerk a knot in your tail and show you new things day by day. I learned more about grace. Grace that's shown to me by my wife, by my family, by my community that I love. I'm shown grace that I should be embodying for the public, for each other. Social media needs grace more than ever, doesn't it? A lot of people here, you control social media ministries and you have a way to use it positively, but as you heard Chad say earlier, and I think Dr. Dandris talked about it, there's a lot of bad out there. But ultimately, more than all of that, grace has been modeled for us from our Savior to our soul. I learned that we naturally gravitate towards a commonality, right? I mean, if you walk into a church, if there's half black church, half white church, most people will naturally go to where they feel most comfortable, which is naturally with people that look like you. You have a commonality. That's natural. We're trying to change that as Christians. We're trying to bring it together. But let me remind you of this, and feel free to share this. If we all gravitate towards a commonality, then what a joy it should be for Christians to gravitate towards other believers. There's our common thread. There's people like us. That common thread is Christ. That supersedes race, culture, anything else. His redemption is our common thread. And that joins us all together. So I'll leave you with this one final thought before we start our dialogue. For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing. It's the gift of God. It's not a result of your works, so that no one may boast. Thank you, guys.
Fantastic. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, so Harvey in the red shirt is going to get your questions from your card. So if you've got a question...
And listen, please ask a question. You cannot offend me. Trust me. I have been through the emotional ringer, and this is an opportunity. If you've got a question, it'll be anonymous. We can talk about anything, either here or online. If you've got a question, please send it in.
So I've got a few questions here, but if you've got one that you want to ask, feel free, put up the card, he'll see it, and he'll bring it to me. Let's start here. So, this tweet. What did you learn about the pain that it caused other people?
Wow, you know, I learned that social media is a deceptive prism because the pain came out as outrage and anger and hatred. You don't get, hey, that really offended me, let's talk about it. That would have been healthy. You learn that with something like social media, your message can become something it's not. So as this was unfolding and what I said was being changed, I didn't know how to approach it to help that pain. Here's an example. We have an organization here in town headed by a woman that I've loved and known for years, and she called me a few days in. She hadn't heard about it originally, and she said, I just had to call and I want to pray for you. I've had some pastors pray for you. And I said, well, tell me what you think. She said, I had a young woman walk into our organization and say, can you believe what that weatherman did? And she said, what? Who? She said, Joey Sulipeck. What'd he do? And this young woman said, he called all black people gorillas.
Wow.
That's how quickly the message became that.
Wow.
So when you ask, how do I feel about that pain? That crushed me. But I know enough to know that's how this works. It went from a tweet that was really, here's an ironic part. I'm going to say this word in church. I hope that God doesn't mind. The last word in my tweet was jackassery, okay? Talking about the refs. The whole post was really about the refs. You guys may not care about these weeds, but I think this is important. I was literally defending a black player on our team and talking about this other player who I thought was aggressive. But back to your point, the word knuckle dragging, which in my estimation had no racial content, quickly got wrapped up into this, you've called an entire race of people animals. I don't know how to fix that.
Right.
So to answer that question, it was soul crushing, and I saw it unwinding coast to coast. I hope nobody ever has to go through anything even remotely like this. And there's no way to even gauge it. There's no way to even gauge it. And that's why I want opportunities. By the way, me saying I'm sorry that ever happened, you all know that doesn't go viral, right? It's the accusation that goes viral and ping pongs around the world. This won't go viral. But I think it's critical that we have these dialogues and share this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's good. Can you tell us, you've alluded to it some, but can you share with us a little bit of the pain that this did to you and your family?
There are literally no words to describe it. I mean, honestly, I could sit here and try to make an allegory or try to explain it, but when, and not just for me, but for my wife, for my children, for my family, for my friends, especially the ones that know me really well, seeing this unfold, I don't have a word to even tell you how low you are and the thoughts that go through your head, especially when you realize, I can't fix this. Now, that's when God comes in and saves the day, because if you don't give it to him, I don't know what you do.
Yeah. All right, so let's play pretend for a minute, okay? We're gonna live in the world of make-believe, all right? Your station that you worked at for 25 years calls you tomorrow, says, all right, we're gonna give you 60 seconds on air on Monday. And you can say whatever you want to say, but you got 60 seconds, and then it's over. What would you say?
Stop calling me. That's a great question. Let me think about this for a second. You going to time me?
I'm going to time you.
You don't have to time me. I'll keep it under 60.
We'll get it. Hold on.
You know,
hold on.
I don't like cliches. But when you start talking about critical things, all right, the timer hadn't started yet, has it?
And go.
Okay. I would say, I'm sorry if anyone was offended. That was never intended. But my encouragement is, don't be led or manipulated in any way. That's the way social media and news is going, where we've become too lazy as Americans, and we want our thoughts pre-chewed. And that's not healthy or good. And Satan can use that. So forget about me. I don't even care. I'm off the air in the next 30 seconds. But don't fall victim to that. That's a trap. Dive in, study, vet, know the sources, know what you think, and stand firm in your Christian faith.
And you're off. So, can you tell us a little bit, how did your church come around you and your family? How did your pastor just kind of help you walk through this really difficult time?
It was immeasurable. I think Dr. Dandridge pointed this out earlier about the community. I mean, that's what the church is for and why it's designed and built, and they were so sweet. And I'll tell you this, when you walk into church after this is broken and you think everybody on the planet hates you, You need warmth. You need people to go out of their way to come up and touch you, tactile, hug you. Keep that in mind going forward for others that you see that may be struggling with something you don't know about. My church was fantastic. My pastors were fantastic. Visiting me, taking me to lunch, walking me through it. My main pastor said to me, he took me to his favorite place, which happens to be Zaxby's, and said, and they all knew him there. And he said, you're going to walk with a limp the rest of your life. He said, be prepared for that. And he's right. I will, my family and I included, we will bear these wounds forever. But again, what's that old saying? Scars are life ribbons. And God can use those. And there's grace in that.
That's good. All right, several questions here. So we'll start with this one. Where had you heard the term knuckle dragger to even repeat it?
Oh, my grandfather was military. It's been used in the military forever. And I didn't say knuckle dragger. I said knuckle dragging, which, again, to me is kind of a bully, caveman type mentality. If you look it up, the definition says stupid and loutish, which seems archaic. I don't think this player is stupid at all. I think he's extremely intelligent. I just know that he is very loud and brash. And in this instance, my guy is very quiet and mild-mannered. And so I was trying to show you've got one who's loud. And that's a great question, too, because, I'm a reading person, and I love the English language, but I don't stuff my head with racial terms. And honestly, this is one of those instances which if I'd had that knowledge, I would have known better. But I didn't know. That's just like any other word, that just to describe something. But I don't know that that's the solution. I don't want to fill my head with slurs, but I do want to be sensitive to everybody.
Right.
Anyway.
Next question. How did you settle with knowing that your intentions may not be accepted, but were true to you?
Ask me that again.
Sorry. How did you settle with knowing that your intentions may never be believed?
Oh, okay, that's a good one. Who here, and don't raise your hands, has ever been at a point in your life where you wanted everybody to like you? Right? Anybody ever felt that way? And maybe you still do, but the healthier alternative is when you finally realize that's just not going to happen. For whatever reason, because people don't really know you unless they're super close. There's people who project onto you. They don't know you, but they're going to project something onto you, or they're going to hear some gossip that's not true, or they're going to hear a rumor. My point is there's no way to control that, especially with the size audience I had locally and this audience nationally. There's just no way to convince everybody of the truth. So you know what I did? Tied it up and said, God, here it is. You know my heart. You know who I am. Use me going forward. Please acquit me first. Use me going forward. And how do we move ahead? And that's why I said earlier, there's all kinds of different opinions about me, and I can't control that. You can't prove intent, but I will say this. While you can't prove intent or your heart, you can do this. Look at the last 20 or 25 years of my public life. Don't make a decision based on a misleading headline that just sort of labeled me. Say, does this make sense? Let me see what his life is like. If you care enough to make a decision. You may not care because we are blasted with this every day on news. And here's something to remember. I've been in these training sessions, and so have some of the people in this room, where consultants would come into a TV newsroom to teach us how to grab attention with a few words because there's so much clutter out there. And we don't read the news anymore, turning the pages of the newspaper. We scroll faster and faster, and so news outlets, and by the way, I'm saying that term very loosely, anybody with an internet connection is now a news outlet, right? People that have no business, they're not journalists, are being credited as sources and as officials, and they're not, but we absorb that and we digest that and we think it's true. But because you're scrolling so quickly, we're taught, how do I grab somebody in 3 words to make them click and read? Because most people don't read. And so our headlines, and you'll see it, they're more and more bombastic and more outlandish. And once you read it, you go, well, this really has nothing to do with what this guy said or this article. That happens over and over and over. And so part of the message I want to get out, Edwin, is don't fall victim to that. Going forward, if you like to learn and be informed and read, dig into the news of the article or whatever. Check the source. See who wrote it. What could their agenda be? Mm-hmm. Because I'll tell you this, division is power. There is power in division. Politically, culturally, there are people who gain advantages by keeping us divided. And that's not what we're called to be as Christians.
Have any believers asked you to be silent? Do they see you as a bad representation of Christians?
I haven't heard that at all. And here would be my answer to that. My whole stance is I want forgiveness. You know, if people can't offer that, I can't control it. So, what is a Christian? We're fractured, lost human beings who are seeking a Savior. I think I'm a perfect representation of a Christian.
Here's another one. He that is without sin cast the first stone. Everybody, regardless of race, has said something that has rubbed others the wrong way. Scripturally, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Do you feel that cancel culture has gone too far in this day and age?
In a short answer, of course, because the bad side of the web is that it can give extreme activism power. Now, we have seen justice I think in many cases where it was deserved. But that can also, I think, run amok. We all want justice. Let me rephrase that. And I had a pastor say this one time, don't ever ask for justice, because if I get what I deserve, then you're in trouble. If God gave us what we deserved, and he's shown us grace and mercy. But cancel culture going forward has to be monitored and watched and paid attention to by us as Christians. We need to just measure everything by the book. Everything. Everything you think and say and do needs to be measured by the gospel, the Old and New Testament, and say, does this square with what God had written, and how do I move forward with that in love?
So what's next? What do you see? You may not be able to see very far into your future, but how are you paying your bills? Like, what you doing?
God has been very good to me, and I have had this conversation with him many times. My faith is not in money. My faith is in God. And, I've been reminded over and over, if God's going to care for the birds, he's going to care for me, right? Mm-hmm. So I love that focus. Anything that you think about all day long becomes your God. Anything that takes all your attention becomes your God. And that can be anything. It can be your health, it can be money, it can be, your standing in society. And so I think it's healthy for all of us to hit reset. And so to answer your question, a lot of people don't know this about me. I was in investments for many years here in town. And God has led me back into that with a group of Christian men and women who are brilliant. And I love what I'm doing. We just work in finance, and we are able to help people if we do pro bono work or whatever it is. And I really love where I've been called to serve.
Excellent. Because there was a rumor that you were an Elvis impersonator, and due to your love of Elvis and Graceland, can you confirm or deny that?
I am not an impersonator. Okay. By the way, we call those tribute artists now.
Oh, sorry.
That's the PC term.
Tribute artist.
Yes.
Okay.
Elvis tribute artist. No, I have worked with Graceland for many years, and that's been a rewarding thing to do. I love my city. I love my community, and we had some opportunities to leave and stay in television, and we turned those down early on because I wanted to stay in this city. And the city of Memphis in the Mid-South has just been amazing to both me and my family. Just amazing. And I'm humbled and grateful for that. And so, I will continue to cheer on our teams and our communities. And that's rich for me. So
10, 15 years from now, what do you hope your kids, what do you hope those that know you and they hear of your name, what do you hope sticks out to them about all this?
When your kids are little, they absorb everything. You're taught watch what you say and do because they will absorb that. They see that modeled. I hope they will see that I have given this entire process over to the Lord, and I tried to let go of bitterness and wrath. My wife gave me Psalm 37, 38 early on that was just so rich about waiting on him, foregoing bitterness and wrath because that leads to evil. I mean, how often do we want to be bitter and have wrath? It's overwhelming. But he took that from me. I hope they remember that I didn't disappear, but God brought me up, and I tried to model what he would want. That's what I hope they see.
All right, we got a note, and we've got another question. All right, so this is just a note. Thank you for all you've done for Memphis. As being a native Memphian who is an African American and has barbecue in his blood, I stand with you. May us bow tie brothers unite.
I love that, and listen, to my core, and I will continue to preach this, when it comes to issues of race, we are all image bearers. God created us in his image. That's who we are. And I love this city. I love the people here. And I want them to know that, you know. And so comments like that, thank you. Whoever wrote it, thank you. I'm never happier than when I'm hugging someone at Kroger. My wife gets tired of me hugging people at Kroger. But thank you. This is a great community. It really is. And honestly, I know we've got people from all over the country or coming here to listen. The South is special. I've got, people I know on the West Coast. I've had family in the Northeast. The South is where people go, it's different here. People seem to be softer and care more. We're the right place for a grassroots revival to begin and to take that message and spread it and foster it and nurture it, and to be the change. We already know God wins. So let's be those soldiers spreading that word.
That's good. All right, last question. What's your top 3 barbecue spots in Memphis? And a note on the end that says, Joey, Memphis loves you. All right? But they want to know, top 3 barbecue spots in Memphis.
Wow. If Monroe is doing the ribs, Cozy Corner. Monroe can doctor up some ribs. This is a tough one. And actually at work, we've been trying to do a barbecue tour. Mm-hmm. Oh, man, that's so tough. Top 3.
Only get 3.
Cozy Corner's got to be up there. What do you think? You think Cozy Corner too? Okay. And this is personal preference, right? I like A&R. Okay. A&R. Right? I mean, that's tough.
You just get one more.
I get one more.
You just get one more.
Man.
Hey, Joey, this is when you upset people. So be careful.
This is where it all goes off the rails, Chris.
So, hey, Chris, what we're going to do is...
You said I wouldn't be set up.
He's going to answer it, but you're going to mute it. And that way, they'll never know the third one. All right?
That's great. My third choice is...
There you go, right? See? And that's all we got for tonight, folks. Wonderful job, right?
Thank you, guys. Thanks, man. That's an excellent question, brother.
You ain't nothing but a